the things they were saying you could do with credit card points was blowing my mind. And I was very skeptical because I was like, this can't be true. Like, no way. I had been taught so many things about credit cards and them being dangerous. And, at the same time, I was like, but if I could fly to India in business class instead of the back economy like I'm used to, like I'm willing to try this. And so I just started slowly learning, slowly opening up credit cards, using them, learning how to do this responsibly. And it changed my entire life.
What if you could reclaim hours of free time each week, create legacy building wealth, and devote more energy to your passion projects without giving up on your career as a life-saving MD? Dr. Vikram Raya is a functional cardiologist, high-performance coach, and real estate expert, is here to give you the tools, strategies, and solutions you need to transform your life, unlock your limitless potential, and achieve greatness, all while freeing up your precious time. Welcome to Limitless MD. Let's dive in.
All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Limitless MD. I'm your host, Vikram Raya, and today I have a super special guest. She's a board-certified physician. She is a travel genius, and she's helping empower thousands of people all over the country to fly first class, live a beautiful life, all with using points and hacks and credit card strategies. So please help me welcome Devon Gimbel to the show. Welcome, Devon.
Hi, thank you so much for inviting me to be here. I'm so excited for this conversation and to talk about truly just one of my all-time favorite things in life. So I'm just thrilled to have this time with you.
Absolutely. So, we've had some really interesting guests on, but no one with this unique skill set. And
That's a little bizarre.
and I really wanted to dive in here. Selfishly speaking, I hope to learn a few tricks before I finish this conversation, guests and the audience members. Hopefully you will as well. And in all honesty, my wife, who's a rheumatologist, she was like, scouring your website, looking at some of the intro information, and she's like, "Oh, this person really knows what they're talking about." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, definitely need to get them on our podcast." And so that's how the story went. And then we have a mutual friend in Christina who's been raving about you. And apparently, every time I hear her, she's in some international hotel or country. I'm like, "How'd you do it?" "Oh, yeah, just on points." I'm like, "Okay." So anyway, that is sort of the background here. But for those of you guys who don't know who Devon really is, she's a double board certified physician. She's a founder of a company called Point Me to First Class, which is a business that helps doctors and self-employed entrepreneurs, people who have businesses and who have these expenses on their credit cards, but they're not learning to use them wisely. And now she's helping them unlock a whole level of luxury travel that was unapproachable before. So that's amazing. And here's some crazy fact. Over the last 10 years, she's earned millions of points and booked over close to probably now is probably more accurate, $500,000 worth of travel for herself and her family. So Devon, first of all, why travel?
Yeah, I mean, why not? I think there are so many things that kind of universally bond people, and travel is one of them. I go back in the Wayback Machine a little bit. I'm probably a little bit older than you. I'm 43 years old. I was born and raised in Southern California, raised by a single mom, didn't have a lot of money in our family, raised in the pre-digital age, right? So there was no computer, there was no internet when I was growing up. We had things like books. We received mail, like actual things in the mail, like magazines. And I remember we got National Geographic magazines, and I just used to sit in my closet late at night with a little flashlight and flip through these National Geographic magazines and just be mesmerized. I remember those full feature layouts on the pyramids in Egypt, right? I remember seeing pictures of aerial photographs of the Okavango Delta in Botswana and just feeling like I need to see this world. This world is so big and so vast and so diverse. And I just had this deep desire to go out and explore and see it. And growing up, we just didn't really have that access. We didn't have those resources. We had a car, so we went on road trips, and I was lucky that I lived in California, so we had beautiful natural resources. We had the redwood forest, we had Joshua Tree. So we did that. We went camping, we went on road trips, and that was wonderful. And I think I was lucky to have those experiences, but I always wanted to see the entire world. And that just wasn't possible for me growing up. And so as I got older, I was always looking for opportunities, basically any excuse, any way I could get out and see the world. And for me, that started, I call the mentality travel by any means necessary. It was truly like if I could find any way to go somewhere, I would do it. And, that led me to have a lot of adventures, a lot of amazing experiences. And then kind of fast forward, on the other side of all of the medical education, all the training, which, as you know, takes many, many, many years, was finally in a position, in my early 30s when I had my first grown-up job outside of training. The first time in my life, I started having just a little bit of disposable income, right? Like, wow, I actually am not living paycheck to paycheck for the first time ever. What do I do? Like how do I steward this money? How do I make decisions? How do I learn how to be a grown-up and deal, with financial responsibility? And so I went on just a personal finance educational journey to just learn all the things that were never taught to me about money growing up. And in sort of the process of doing that, I start going down rabbit holes on the internet, as one does, and I start finding these points travel blogs and people talking about using credit card points and not just earning credit card points for 10 years so that you could travel one domestic flight across the country. I mean, the things they were saying you could do with credit card points was blowing my mind. And I was very skeptical because I was like, this can't be true. Like, no way. I had been taught so many things about credit cards and them being dangerous. And, at the same time, I was like, but if I could fly to India in business class instead of the back of the back economy like I'm used to, like, I'm willing to try this, And so I just started slowly learning, slowly opening up credit cards, using them, learning how to do this responsibly. And it changed my entire life in terms of the way I travel, the amount that I travel, the travel experiences that are available to me now. And I had this really interesting experience as I was learning how to do this. At the time, I was working a very traditional job as a full-time dermatopathologist. I was an employed physician in a small pathology private practice in the area where I live now, which is the suburbs of Chicago. And so our group had, at the time, around 7 full-time physicians. 4 of them were partner owners. 3 of us were juniors. And so usually once a month, we would all get together as a group and just kind of talk about the practice, right? Like what's going on, what are the needs of the practice, kind of where are the expenses, where's our growth, all these things. And so I got to sit in, on these business meetings of physicians owning and running, their own medical practice. And we would talk about things because we had our own laboratory that we ran, off site. And so we had to talk about what immunostainer did we need to buy, how many microtomes. And these are things, as you're probably familiar, medical equipment is not inexpensive, right? So if you need a new piece of equipment for your laboratory, this could be $100,000, $200,000, $300,000, right? You have all these expenses. And I'm learning about credit card points at the same time. And it was this light bulb. I was like, this is a gold mine, right? Like you see all of these legitimate expenses. I'm learning at the same time, you can use credit card points or credit cards to pay for your business expenses, also your personal expenses, buy the things you need to buy, and in the process, accumulate this alternate form of currency in the form of credit card points, and then use those points for incredibly valuable things. And it was then that I realized, wait a minute, basically anyone who's a physician, again, I was employed, I was not, a practice owner, but I had personal expenses. I'm spending money on my life, to run my life. And I'm thinking, wow, this is such an amazing opportunity. And that's really where it started for me. And that was, a little over 10 years ago now. And as you've heard, I feel like I've done a pretty good job learning how to do this and how to turn, credit card points into just unforgettable travel experiences for myself and for my family and teaching other people how to do it too.
Let's dig into that, Devin.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your unforgettable travel experiences.
Yeah.
Give me your top 3.
Okay. The first one, I feel like the first time you learn how to do something and it works, that's unforgettable. So again, let me set the scene. The context is at this point, I'm in my early 30s. I have traveled extensively around the world. Again, always in the most economy of economy classes. I mean, I've flown to South America, India, East Africa, North Africa, South Africa, Asia. I mean, 70 times in economy. This is my background. So I start learning how to do credit card points. And this must have been probably around 2013, 2014-ish. And I'm earning my points. And there's a medical conference that I was going to attend in Paris, melanoma conference, dermatopathologist dream. We love learning about melanoma. And, I'm based in Chicago. So I'm not, flying from the West Coast, but, to fly from Chicago to Paris, that's not a short flight. Oftentimes when you're going from the States to Europe, those are overnight flights. I have stayed awake in cramped economy plane seats so many evenings in my life.
I
'Cause
call
you
it
just
I
can't.
call it cattle class.
Exactly. I mean, and especially now compared to even 10 or 15 years ago, those seats are getting smaller and smaller. Planes are getting more and more crowded. My body is getting older. It is not comfortable to be sitting upright in those seats, for whatever, 6, 7, 10 hours. And so I'd been saving up these points. And in the world of, using credit card points, there are some really kind of typical aspirational kind of redemptions, things that are pretty easy to do once you know how to do them, but they're just kind of like bucket list experiences. And one of those is flying first class on Lufthansa Airlines. And so what a lot of people don't know, especially if you've done most of your travel domestically, when you think of an airplane, you think of economy class, which I think almost all of us recognize. And then you think of domestic first class, which is, again, if you think about United Airlines or Delta or
Yeah.
American, you walk on the airplane, there's like 5 rows in the front, of the airplane,
Yeah.
2x2 seats, recliner seats. They're bigger and more comfortable than economy for sure. But I don't think anyone is, like daydreaming about spending, 12 hours in one of those seats. International airlines are a whole different ballgame, right? Because not only do you have the regular economy and premium economy, most international airlines have business class, which is millions of light years more comfortable than domestic first class. That has the seats that I think people really think about when they imagine luxury travel, the full lie flat seat. Oftentimes now, you don't have another person kind of pinning you in that you have to climb over, if you need to get over to the aisle. There's a higher level of service, better food, better amenities, all these things. Well, some airlines still internationally, not only do they have business class, but they have first class as well. And international first class is then really the highest class of service that you can sit in or have on an airline. And that tends to be an even smaller cabin, 4 to 8 seats max, the biggest seats on the airplane, the very, very best service, all of these things. And Lufthansa is an airline that's based in Germany. Their hub is in Frankfurt, and they have a classic first class experience. So I use my points for the first time ever to book myself flying first class from Chicago to Frankfurt and then Frankfurt to Paris. And I will tell you, I used about a third the number of points for a first class international flight as I did to fly economy to Morocco with my husband, which is the first time I ever used points. And I had no idea what I was doing. And I think that highlights how most people use their points. Most of us don't know what we're doing.
I think what this is getting into is
Yeah.
point efficiency. It's also showing
Yes.
it's all
Yes.
about experiences.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And so just as a side note, I know melanoma now has a vaccine. Is that right?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I'm probably not the best person to
Yeah.
ask about that
Yeah.
since I'm not don't
Yeah.
practice dermatology and I've been out of dermatology for a few years now.
Are
Yeah.
you still practicing now, or have you
I'm
made this
not.
your full-time business?
So I've made this my full-time business, but I didn't actually transition directly away from medicine and into this. I transitioned away from medicine about 5 years ago. It was late 2019. I obviously been doing this as a personal hobby for many years, but transitioned out of medical practice and then, sort of somewhat coincidentally, fortuitously right before the pandemic. So stayed home. I had 2 very young children during the pandemic. So stayed home with them since everything was shut down. And then when the world kind of resumed back to normal, I was looking for what I wanted to do next. Still wasn't sure if I wanted to step back into traditional medical practice, but I'd been doing this as a hobby for so long that I just wanted to see, does anybody else want to learn how to do this? Because again, I really think that physicians, business owners, entrepreneurs are in such an amazing position to take advantage of this hobby. And I felt like so many people in this community just weren't aware it even existed. And so I just wanted to open up that conversation and see, does anybody want to talk about this? Which is why originally I started a Facebook group thinking maybe 5 or 6 people would join. This would be great. I'd have, like a handful of people to talk about this with. And, lo and behold, it's grown. And it seems like a lot of people
in your
want to learn
Facebook
about
group
this.
right now?
There's about 24,000 now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow,
So it turns
that's
out more
amazing.
than, 5 or 6 people want to talk about this and learn about it, which I think is amazing.
And then you started the Point Me to First Class course.
Yes, I did. So Point Me to First Class is my business, which has been around for a little over 2 years now. And originally it was just, this free Facebook group for people to have access to talk about points. And then I started seeing kind of the same questions come up. I think there's sort of two different types of people when it comes to learning a new hobby or learning a new skill. There are the people who, because they have the time or the interest or the inclination, they want to dig in and they want to learn everything there is to learn. And they have fun kind of piecing it together from all the resources that are out there. We have so much information that's available on the internet. And so that's kind of one group of people. And then there's another group of people who I think will find a hobby and say, oh, wow, this is really interesting to me. This seems really valuable. I don't right now have the time or the interest to teach this whole thing to myself by myself. But if it was easy for me to learn how to do this, I would absolutely take advantage of it. And that is why I created a course, because I acknowledge there are going to be a large group of people who do exactly what I did. They fall in love with this, they have enough time or they have enough interest where they want to go on the treasure hunt on the internet and piece together all the information and teach themselves. But there's also a huge group of people who want to take advantage of this. They don't necessarily want to teach themselves, but if they have a roadmap, they will follow that roadmap because they want that result of, again, booking travel they never would pay cash for or saving thousands of dollars on travel. And that's why then I ended up creating the course for that second group of people.
So it's beautiful. It's like the same thing. You want to learn real estate, you could, trial and error it, or you
Right.
can take a course, a coach, a mentor, go to a conference and learn quickly. And Devon, what you did was you collapsed time for people who want to learn the skill of maximizing points, traveling, upgrading, luxury, the whole thing. And it's all there for people to consume. That's amazing. So now that you've been doing this, is this what you do full time?
This is what I do full time. So I've been doing
Wow.
this full time now
You get
for
to do your
probably,
passions full time.
yeah, exactly, for about the last 2 years. And, I think one of the things that's really important to acknowledge is that I think, especially if you're in medicine, it is an area that I think traditionally has been kind of homogenous in the sense that I think we're kind of taught there's like one pathway, right? Like you go through your undergrad, you get into med school, you do the residency, you do the fellowship, you get the grown-up job, and that's what you do until you're 65 and you retire, right? Like that's the normal quote unquote pathway. And I think for a lot of people that works and that is beautiful and wonderful. And I feel like for our generation, now it's becoming much more common for people to have the conversation of, oh, maybe that isn't actually the pathway for every single person. And I thought that was going to be my pathway. When I first joined the private practice out of fellowship, I thought, great, this is going to be my forever job. I'm going to do this until I'm 65, retire, and then maybe take a trip. And I think what's really great is that we now live in a time and a place where we can actually explore some of those other passions. And if we want to turn those into part of our professional identity or what we do outside of medicine, we have the opportunity to do that. And so I have now fully transitioned into doing this full time, which was in some ways unexpected, but
So,
also incredibly fulfilling.
so let's unpack that a little bit because
Yeah.
there's so many people, a lot of high income physicians, professionals, entrepreneurs in the podcast who listen. They want to make that jump. They're scared or they're wondering if they're going to lose their identity. Can you help me
Yeah.
navigate some of that? So those thought processes
Yeah.
you may have also had?
Yeah, absolutely. I get it. I can understand it. I think medicine is one of those things that it is so demanding that most of us who went into medicine, it wasn't like the thing we did on the side, right? It was the thing. It was the thing that we studied for, prepared for, worked for. I mean, for decades, right? And so first of all, I just want to acknowledge that for those of us who are sitting in that space of wow, like this is, it's not just what I do, this is who I am, this is my identity. I get it. I think it makes a lot of sense. And I want everyone to remember you were something before you were a doctor, right? You probably had something, even if all you ever wanted to be growing up was a doctor like me. Like I said, I can go back and I can remember as a kid, before I knew anything about what a job was, right? Or what retirement accounts were. It was like, who were you before you knew you were supposed to be anything? And for me, I was the kid who learned. I was the kid who was fascinated by the world. And I was the kid who looked at National Geographic magazines and wanted to go to all those places. And I think who you were, before you learned you had to be something, I think that leaves clues in terms of where are your passions is certainly true for me. And I also want to say, I think sometimes in medicine, because again, it is such an all-encompassing, it is so demanding that those of us in medicine can sometimes have a little bit of a binary mindset. We think things have to be all one thing or all another, right? Like I'm a physician or I'm not. I practice a traditional job or I burn it all to the ground and I go and become an entrepreneur. And I just want to offer that there's so much in between space that you don't have to approach it in that way. So, and I think that that makes it a little bit easier to then envision, wow, if I wasn't just a physician, if I wanted to try one other thing, what might that look like? And you can grow into that. It doesn't have to be, like I said, I'm a physician one day, then I walk away from my practice, never do it again, and do something totally different. Maybe that is someone's path. That doesn't have to be everybody's path.
Yeah, I really believe in the, let's stand for the and let go of the or,
Yes.
So
Yes.
like, hey, I'm a doctor, I'm a cardiologist, and I happen to be, into real estate, or I happen to have a book club I run on the side, whatever. It doesn't matter. I have a food truck, who knows?
Yeah,
But it's
absolutely.
it's interesting, right? And
Yeah.
it allows you to explore all the persons of you. And I really love how you went go back to your childhood, and your
Hmm.
childhood would give you clues like, the great Tony Robbins, he always said, man, when I was a kid, I want to be a rock star. I want to be like an adventure person. I want to help people. And lo and behold, like multiple years later, in a way, he's a rock star because he has like these events or
Right.
like concerts. And so it's interesting that you can weave into your current life all the notes or hints of passions you had growing up. And you seem to have done that. Any regrets on going all in with this versus still practicing?
I don't think that I have a regret about going in all in on this. I think that anytime that you've dedicated a significant amount of your life, your time, your energy to something, if that aspect of your life concludes, whether it's by choice or by force, I think it's very natural and I think it's very human to be somewhat conflicted about that and to experience grief about that or to experience sadness about that. And what I'll say is that, there are definitely elements of practicing medicine that I miss. I didn't hate medicine. So like I said, I'm a dermatopathologist by fellowship training. I loved looking through a microscope. I actually just was online doing some of my, CME continuing education today, looking at digital images, of different like skin conditions. And I was just thinking, these are so beautiful. I miss doing that on a day-to-day basis. And there's a lot of things that I don't miss. There are so many things I can do now, both in my life, my profession, that I couldn't do when I was working 60, 70 hours a week, in a very traditional kind of high volume private practice pathology position. And so there are things that I miss. And it's coming back to exactly what you said. Can we live in the world of and I get so many different opportunities now that I would have just either not had or had to say no to if I was in a very traditional
Yes.
practice. And I value those things. Who I am now at 43 years old, very different than who I was coming out of fellowship training at 31 when I was married, but I didn't have any kids, and I had multiple six figures in student loan debt and no assets to my name. It's very different than who I was when I was 20. And I'm okay with that.
So let's talk about where we're going here. Sounds like you made Point Me to First Class really like your seminal business, and you're really geeked out about it. You got the Facebook group, you have all these predominantly women, but let's chat about that. Is your strategies meant for women, or is it for everybody?
That's such a great question. So, no, I don't think strategies are gender based, but here was my experience. When I started flying, around the world in business and first class using points, one of the things that I've noticed very frequently, especially on these long haul international flights, noticed two things. Number one, I was almost always the only woman in that cabin, if not one of very, very few women. And I was also much younger than other people traveling. Again, and it's not like I was 10. I was in, my 30s and early 40s, but still significantly felt like at least 10 years ago, wow, I'm in a different demographic right now, than everyone else in this cabin. And I think one of the things that was part of my passion about not just doing this for myself as a hobby, which I obviously love, but really expanding this to other people is that one, I don't think that women specifically are taught, think about yourself traveling the way you want to travel. Not everyone wants to travel business and first class. And I think that's fine and beautiful. But I think so many women are never even given that possibility to say, wow, like, why don't you fly to Dubai in business class? Or why don't you take your partner or your children to Europe and stay, in a 5-star hotel? And so when I teach, it's not that I teach strategies that are specific to women, but I want women to be included in places that traditionally they have not been included. And I think that it really takes seeing that possibility for people sometimes to say, oh, I didn't even know. Like I didn't even know that I could do that. And I think especially when they hear that now, I travel and my family travels in business class for less out of pocket cash cost than what we paid to fly in economy. I think people are like, oh, wait a minute. Like I can definitely get on board
Yeah.
with that. And so, in the context of what I teach, my Facebook group is specifically for women physicians because in my experience, whenever you're talking about something that's sort of financial adjacent, which obviously when we're talking about credit cards and maximizing our expenses and really leveraging what are we spending money on to and how can we turn that into credit card points, I do find that traditionally women are not always they don't always feel included or welcome in conversations about that. A lot of times women have the experience of being, condescended to and patronized when we try to talk about things that are financial or financial adjacent. And so it was important for me to create a space where that whole element was just removed, where it's just women physicians talking to other women physicians. But my broader business, I have a podcast. Anyone can listen to that podcast and learn from it. My course, anyone can enroll in the course and learn from that. So I don't teach only women, but I want women to be in the
I
conversation.
love how I never even noticed that statistic you pointed out, in first class. And so I think you're absolutely right. And it's almost like you're just creating, like getting rid of another glass barrier. If there was such a thing in an airplane, glass barrier, there we go. You just took a freaking sledgehammer to it and just cracked it open, which is
I'm
awesome.
trying, yeah.
That's awesome. Let's talk about where this whole thing could really
Yeah.
go. I mean, it's amazing. From a dermatopathologist to this entrepreneur to this like movement maker. And are you thinking TV shows? Are you thinking books? Are you
Oh,
thinking
absolutely not.
where
No.
where are we taking this whole thing?
Absolutely not a TV show. It's so interesting when you run a business. I think so many of us, there's the thing that we teach or the thing we do, right? Which is, I think, where most of us, where our passion leads us. And then purely from a business perspective, there is that marketing and selling aspect, right? Like, how do I tell people what it is I do so that the people who could benefit from this or learn from this even know that I exist? And I have to say, when it comes to that aspect of it, again, this may just be a generational thing. I cannot be on Instagram. Like I'll be on there as a consumer. I'll watch, cat memes or videos or whatever. But in terms of putting myself out there, that's not at all what's appealing to me. I actually would be the worst person to ever have their own TV show. I have no interest in that whatsoever. I want to teach people. And I think for me, the question is always, how can I teach better? And the people who, again, stand to benefit from what it is I can teach, what is the best way that I can just let them know this thing exists? And so, no, 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 not a television show. I mean, I love doing things like this. I love having conversations with other folks
So
and then meeting people that way.
so I know there are a handful of people who are listening today to this podcast. They're like, I probably made all the top rookie mistakes. So
Oh,
what
all
are
of us have.
those? What are the top 3 to 5 rookie mistakes
Yes,
in this
I
field
love this
space?
question because anyone who kind of gets into this hobby, this is like a rite of passage. We have all made these mistakes. And if you are making one of them, just know the good news is this means you're on the first step, right? You're on the first step to this path. And so, number one, I think one of the key mistakes is having one credit card that you put all of your expenses on, and that being either a store specific card or a card that only functionally earns cash back. So this could be like, I know this is going to be heresy to some people who love cashback cards, but this could be like your Amazon card or your Costco credit card, or I don't know, back in the day when you would have a Macy's credit card. Having something like that and putting all your expenses on it, it's not that it's a terrible thing, but you are definitely missing out. Okay,
Yeah.
so that's mistake number one.
Okay.
Mistake number two, which is the first huge mistake that I ever made in this whole thing as well, is for people who do have a credit card that earns what we call like rewards points or some sort of points currency. So some folks listening to this might have an American Express card that earns Amex points or a Chase credit card that earns Chase points, right? The very first thing that almost all of us do when we log on to our credit card account and we look at our points balance, because it's really fun to see that points balance go up. You get this like big dopamine hit when you see you have 250,000 points in your account. Your credit card account will oftentimes tell you, oh, your 250,000 points are worth $2,500 worth in travel, right? So you can basically cash in your points through your credit card account. You can use it to book a, flight, a rental car. You can turn it in for a statement credit. You can turn it in for gift cards. This is the big mistake that all of us make in the beginning, is that we believe our credit card account when it tells us what our points are worth. And what I mean by that is that we go ahead and we use our 250,000 points through our credit card account to book a $2,500 flight. That's exactly what I did when I said my husband and I, first time we cashed out our points after earning them for 3 years, cashed in 250,000 Chase points to fly both of us round trip economy from Chicago to Marrakesh. Had an amazing trip, not in economy, for 12 hours on Iberia Airlines, right? Fast forward, and now I realized 250,000 Chase points, if you use them through your credit card account, yes, they'll get you $2,500 worth of travel. But if you actually know what to do with them instead, which is just move those points out of Chase and into an actual airline frequent flyer account, instead of $2,500 worth of travel, it could be $5,000, $10,000 worth of travel. So this is the second thing I always tell people, is that if you already have points, don't redeem them through your credit card account. You're going to get the least amount of value possible if you do that, right? And then the third kind of beginner mistake, again, that so many of us make, is that a lot of people, if they do have a credit card that earns points or miles, invariably it's almost always one airline credit card that they, again, put a lot of their expenses on, because maybe they lived at a United hub when they were in undergrad, right? And flew United to go home and visit their parents, right? Or maybe this is such a classic one. For those of you who live in Atlanta, I get it. You can only fly Delta. And right, exactly. Like, you are a Delta hub. You are not getting on any other airline ever. I understand it. But for someone who even lives in Atlanta, or another airline hub, having an airline credit card and putting all of your expenses on there because, you're thinking, oh, I might get a free flight out of this, right? I'll earn my airline miles. I'll get a free flight out of it. It's such a low value thing to do, because most of the time, those airline credit cards, unless you're actually paying for a flight on that airline, you are almost always only going to be earning one airline mile for every dollar you spend. So even if you have significant expenses, let's say you're spending $150,000 a year on your credit card, if you're putting that on an airline credit card, your baseline probably going to earn around 150,000 airline miles, okay? If you use a different credit card that's going to actually reward you more, give you more points when you put certain type of expenses on that card, you could be earning, instead of 150,000 miles, you could be earning 200,000, 300,000 credit card points. So you can earn way more points for the same amount of spend. And then you have way more options of what to do with those points than just have them in United or just have them in Delta. So those are kind of three very common, and I don't want to call them mistakes. I think those are three really common patterns of credit card usage that are not bad. But when you learn, oh my gosh, there's so much more that you could be doing, most people tend to stop doing those credit card habits.
I'm sure at this point, people are like, yep, check.
Yep.
That's me. So how can they learn about your course, and, how can they get involved with work?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to learn more about this, I think the easiest place to start with my podcast. It's called the Point Me to First Class podcast. I give a broad range of topics there, but it's great for beginners. You don't have to commit to anything. If you just want to learn what is this person talking about? What is this whole world of credit card points? What does it look like for someone, again, who's an employed physician or potentially a business owner, entrepreneur? What does it look like when you can actually turn your expenses into amazing travel? And what are the building blocks of that? Just come check out my podcast. Also, all the information about me, what I do, you can easily find online at my website, which is just pointmetofirstclass.com. So there's a lot of resources there as well.
So yeah, guys, it's pointmetofirstclass.com, all one word. It will be in the show notes. Please click on it. I've been exploring her website. There's a blog. There's so much information there. And then I know she has periods of time where she opens up her course. Highly recommend it. She has a starter course just to, dip your toes in the water. I've had numerous physicians take the course, raving reviews. And when I ask them where they are, they're in Greece, they're in Turkey, they're in, you name it, somewhere, some far reach of the world, probably in first class, 5-star, living a great life. So why not you? So guys, you don't have to be a billionaire to travel like a billionaire. So
No, you don't.
follow Devon's information. So as before we leave, who's your role model in travel or in luxury experiences, or who do you follow? What would be some cool resources for some of these guys to check out?
Yeah, absolutely. I follow a couple of different people. Again, when I first started learning how to do this, there were a couple of key blogs that are still around that I think for someone who wants to do some of that internet research, they're still amazing. I think one of them is called The Points Guy. I think he's definitely sort of the cornerstone in points travel, points blogging, learning how to do this. I think he's got a really great accessible website for people who are more familiar with this hobby and they really want to start learning some of the more granular details. There's another group. They do mostly podcasting, but they also have a blog, and they are called Frequent Miler. They do a phenomenal analysis of all things credit card, using points to travel. They're a little bit more of an advanced level, but for people who are brand new to this, you can also check out the Points Guide. That's really where I started learning everything, and they have wonderful resources there as well.
That's awesome. Thank you, Devon. And before I let you go, where is your next trip?
Oh my gosh, my next trip. So my kids right now, they're 8 and 5. We tend to plan a lot of travel around their traditional spring and winter breaks when they're out of school. And so when they're on winter break this December, this is the first time we're taking them long haul. We've done a lot of travel with them, kind of more local, international, but we're going to Malta and Istanbul with the kids. And so I'm really looking forward to that. And we're flying business class there, business class back, staying in hotels that I'm not spending any money for. So it should be fantastic.
I love it. Love it. Love it. Awesome. All right, guys. Thank you again for listening in. Please, rate us on the podcast. Keep following us on YouTube. Thank you again for all your support. Guys, until next time, be phenomenal.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Limitless MD. If you found value from this episode, I encourage you to share this episode with a friend and let me know by leaving a review. For more information, make sure you check out the links in the show notes below or simply visit vikramraya.com. Until next time, be phenomenal.